Welcome to Prophecy Countdown with author and pastor Kenneth Baer. Join us every week for the latest updates on what the Bible has to say about the events, the characters, and prophetic signs of the return of Jesus Christ and His coming kingdom. Make sure you not only subscribe, but like your favorite episodes and share it with your friends. Now, on with the broadcast.
Welcome to Faith Dialogue and the Prophecy Countdown podcast. I'm Pastor Ken. And welcome to today's prophecy update. Today's message is number 494, The True Sabbath Rest. Our podcast premiere on multiple channels twice a week on Sunday and Wednesday at 11 a.m. To view the entirety of our podcast on video, you can go to the Faith Dialogue Patreon page or our video ministry page on the website at faithdialogue.org. We welcome your comments, your questions, and any ideas for future episodes. You can email us at prophecycountdownpodcast@gmail.com. So let's get into today's teaching, number 494, The True Sabbath Rest. Let me start off today's teaching with a little story. Have you ever heard of a Sabbath elevator? They have them in Jerusalem, of course, but you don't have to go all the way to Israel to see one. I actually saw one in Miami. It was in a high-rise building in a very Jewish neighborhood, and it was clearly marked on the outside, Sabbath elevator. And you see, I found out that from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, this elevator will run automatically. It goes up and down, hitting every single floor, stopping at every single floor. You might wonder, why would anyone want an elevator that stops on every floor? Most people like an express. Well, here's the reason. Because on the Sabbath, observant Jews are not allowed to push a button. Why? Well, because pressing the button is considered work by the rabbis. And on the Sabbath, according to the laws of the rabbis, as the rabbis interpret it, there's no pushing of buttons allowed on elevators. Now, to most of us, pushing a button doesn't feel much like labor. But this gives you an idea of just how seriously the Sabbath is taken by traditional Jewish law. It also shows you how far things can go when man starts adding rules to rules. Now, if you're a little older, you might remember that even up north and in Gentile country, Sunday used to feel a lot like the Sabbath. I remember being on a road trip, heading south from Michigan when I was a kid, driving through Georgia, and it was a Sunday. And my mom was very, very concerned because the car fuel indicator was almost on E, and my dad had stopped at a number of gas stations, but they were all closed. He couldn't find a single gas station that was open on that Sunday morning. Everything was closed. You see, Sunday was to be different. You didn't go to the store, you didn't mow the lawn, you didn't even play ball. In some towns and some leagues didn't even play on Sundays. Now, those rules didn't just appear out of anywhere. Those rules are all referred to what we know as blue laws, regulations in place in many states that restricted what you could do and what you couldn't do. These laws were based on the idea that Sunday had become the Christian Sabbath. But here's the thing. Sunday isn't the Sabbath. Saturday is the Sabbath. And in actuality, it's not just Saturday. It's from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. And here's the bottom line. For Christians, the true Sabbath isn't really about a day at all. Did you know that? So my teaching today, number 494, The True Sabbath, we are going to be taking a look at where these Sabbath rules came from and what the Bible actually says about the day. You know, in Hebrews chapter 4, it teaches us about the true Sabbath, a rest that goes far beyond a weekly routine and points us straight to Jesus Christ. So let's go back to where it all began, the original Sabbath. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, we're told that after 6 days of creation, God rested on the seventh day. Now, he rested not because he was tired. God doesn't get tired. He rested in order to set a pattern. The Sabbath wasn't just a suggestion. It became part of God's rhythm. It was part of the Ten Commandments. It became a rhythm for God's people. Later, when the Ten Commandments were given to Moses on Mount Sinai, the fourth commandment read this way. It said, "Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work." That's Exodus chapter 20. Now, this day of rest was a sign from God that this was his covenant with the people of Israel. It was holy. It was set apart. The Sabbath was a day to cease from labor and focus on God. It was not only a remembrance of creation, it was also a remembrance that Israel had been delivered from slavery in Egypt. And in fact, Deuteronomy chapter 15, Moses makes that point. It says, "And remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day." Over time, however, the Sabbath became less about resting in God and more about keeping many, many rules. Jewish leaders, wanting to make sure that no one broke the Sabbath, began to build fences around the law, adding law after law to protect the commandment, the fourth commandment. Eventually, scholars count 39 different categories, not just laws, but categories of laws, forbidding activities. These included things like carrying objects, lighting a fire, how far you can walk, tying knots, and as we heard earlier, those laws that would eventually lead the people in Miami and the people in Jerusalem to have elevators on the Sabbath that ran automatically. No pushing of buttons on the Sabbath. But you see, Jesus came. And when Jesus came, he began to challenge the legalism of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, about what they had done to the Sabbath. You know, Jesus allowed a number of things. He healed on the Sabbath in direct violation of what the Pharisees and the Sadducees said he couldn't do. He allowed his disciples to pick grain. He showed compassion. And this just infuriated the leaders of the day. In Mark chapter 2, Jesus says this. He says, "The Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also the Lord of the Sabbath." And of course, those words infuriated the Jews, and that's one of the reasons that Jesus was crucified. You see, Jesus wasn't rejecting the Sabbath. Jesus was reclaiming the Sabbath. Jesus was pointing people back to the heart of the Sabbath. It was about rest. It was about relationship. It was about renewal. Many of the early converts to Christianity were not Jewish. They were Gentiles. Thank you, Apostle Paul. These Gentiles never had to put up with the legalism imposed by the Pharisees. And the early church began gathering not on Saturday, the Sabbath day, but on Sunday. They called it the Lord's Day. It was the first day of the week. It was the day that Jesus rose from the dead. So they would gather together to celebrate, to have fellowship, to break bread. That's when the new life began, was on the Lord's Day. Revelation chapter 1 even uses those words, the Lord's Day, in referring to this first day of the week. Christians didn't transfer the Sabbath to Sunday. They merely took a day, set it aside to be able to recognize what Jesus had done and to be able to fellowship. It was about the resurrection. But over time, tension arose between the Jewish Sabbath on Saturday and the new Christian rhythm of gathering together on the Lord's Day. In fact, as early as the 4th century, the church council in Laodicea issued a clear ruling stating that Christians should not Judaize. That was the word that was used. They shouldn't Judaize the Sabbath day by resting on Saturday, but rather honor the Lord's Day, Sunday, as both the day of worship as well as the day of rest. Still, this didn't change everyone's habits overnight, especially in people in rural communities or among the Jewish Christians and also those people that were less educated. Many Christians continued to have respect for Saturday, honored as the Sabbath, as well as gathering together on Sunday. But then came the Middle Ages, when Sunday observance became the law. And it wasn't just church law, but remember, the Roman Empire was the Roman Catholic Church. It was the same. Starting in the 8th century, Emperor Charlemagne and other emperors after him passed legislation forbidding work on Sundays. And this included all kinds of work, including farming, legal, business, and even public markets were shut down on Sundays. By the 12th century, this is centuries later, Sunday had become in practice a kind of Christian Sabbath, enforced by both pulpits and kings. And then came the Reformation. And then in Protestant culture, many Christians tried to treat Sunday as if it was the Sabbath. And that's how what we got, there's a term that's actually known as Sunday Sabbatarianism, meaning that Sunday became the Sabbath, that all of the rules and regulations of the Sabbath were transferred to Christians and to be observed on Sunday. And this, of course, gave rise to what we know as the Blue Laws. So that when I was a kid, everything was shut down on Sunday. No alcohol, no shopping, no pumping gas, no work on Sunday. And culturally, in our churches, these ideas were reinforced. Sunday was the day you went to church. You ate with your family and you took a nap. And quite frankly, I miss those days. Those were wonderful times. I love going to church. I want to encourage people to go to church. I encourage people to be with their families on Sundays. I think it's wonderful taking naps. And the older I get, the more important naps become. So don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with rest. There's nothing wrong, and certainly it's important and uplifting to go to church on Sunday or having a quiet Sunday. The issue is that when this rest becomes a rule, that's when grace is replaced by guilt, and something goes radically wrong. Now, what's the solution for this? Well, again, I suggest go to church on Sunday. Enjoy your time. I mean, the cycle of rest you need. That's why we go to bed early and wake up early. We go to bed, we take vacations. This is the pattern of a Sabbath rest. You need some time off. You can't keep burning the candle. You will burn out. But there is a solution to this. And the solution is found where all solutions are found, and that's in the Bible. In Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4 explains what the true Sabbath is. It's not about a day. It's about a relationship. Listen to Hebrews chapter 4, verse 3. It says, "We who have believed do enter that rest." That's present tense. We've entered into it now. And the writer of Hebrews is specifically talking about the Sabbath. You see, the Sabbath isn't once a week or something we wait for. It's something we've already entered into. You see, when you put your faith in Jesus Christ, you stop striving for God's favor. Stop striving for God's approval. You stop trying to be good enough. You lay down your works and you rest. You rest in Christ. Just like God rested after his creation, we rest in the finished work of Jesus Christ. Hebrews 4, verses 9 and 10 says this. It says, "There remains therefore a rest for the people of God. For he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from his." You see the correlation with the Sabbath? We enter into the rest that's available in the finished work of Jesus Christ. This is the gospel. You see, we're saved by grace through faith. That's Ephesians chapter 2. This means no more striving, no more earning. The burden of religion has been lifted. Jesus said that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. Not because life is easy, far from it. It's because Jesus Christ carries our burdens. The true Sabbath is a spiritual rest, and every believer who trusts in Christ has already entered into it. But that's not all. Hebrews also points to the rest that is still to come. You see, there's a rest now that we can enter into it, but there's also a promise of a rest that is to come. Verse 9 says, "There remains a rest, a future rest that hasn't yet arrived." And are you curious about that? Well, I'll tell you about it. It's called the millennial reign of Christ. It's a 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. It's described in Revelation chapter 20. It's the seventh day in God's timeline of history. Just as God worked for 6 days and on the seventh day he rested, many believe that human history will likewise unfold. A very similar pattern, approximately 6,000 years of man's toil, followed by a 1,000-year reign of peace and righteousness with Jesus Christ on the throne, literally, spiritually, physically. The millennial Sabbath is the ultimate rest for creation. It's the fulfillment of the promises to Israel. It's the reward, the just reward for the just. It's a world finally ruled with justice and mercy, where the Prince of Peace sits on the throne. So, again, we've talked about this before. We live now in the already and the not yet. It's something that we have now, but it's also something that is to come. We've already entered into spiritual rest through Christ. That's what Hebrews chapter 4 says. And we look forward to the final physical global rest when Jesus returns. And so, my friends, as we close, here's my question for you. Are you resting in Christ? Have you laid down the burdens of trying to be good enough, holy enough, worthy enough? Just as there's no button to push on the Sabbath elevator, there's no buttons that need to be pushed for a person that's in Christ. Because being in Christ assures us of our salvation. Jesus has already carried you where you need to go. The work is finished. As Hebrews 4:11 says, let us therefore be diligent to enter into that rest, not by working harder, but by trusting more deeply. Jesus is our Sabbath. He's our rest. He's our peace. And here's the point I want to make as we close. He is coming again.
While there are many opinions on the topic of the apocalypse, this book doesn't merely give an opinion. The Bible is the greatest source of information on the end times, which many people call the apocalypse. The full title of this book is The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom, as Jesus is returning soon. Many have a fascination with the big question, how's it all going to end? The return of Jesus is the greatest promise yet to be fulfilled in the Bible. This book uncovers what many have only understood to be the hidden mysteries of end-time biblical prophecies. It is a definitive and prophetic look at the coming kingdom of Christ and the fate of all humanity. Available in print, on Kindle, and also on Audible, author and pastor Kenneth Baer's The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom zeroes in on and breaks down biblical prophecy as it relates to Jesus' upcoming return and the coming 7-year period, including the Great Tribulation. Get your copy today.